Hi, I'm Phil Collins.
I'm Mike Rutherford.
And I'm Tony Banks.
Of Genesis. And you're watching MTV, the world's first all-day, all-night video music channel.
In stereo.
Once it got to Invisible Touch and we had, in America we had a #1 single suddenly, extraordinary. And, half a dozen songs off that album was the way America calculated charts, was on radio play as much as on sales, and we were played everywhere. So we had all these songs or hits. I actually thought about doing a solo album before Trick of the Tail. So I did it and, I wrote A Curious Feeling. I was obviously hoping for more success than it had, I have to be honest about it, really. But it did make the top 20, so, can't be too bad. So I did a load of those albums, I did about half a dozen albums, 5 albums, something, solo albums. But then the idea came, perhaps just before I concede, I should have a go doing stuff with an orchestra. And I wrote a couple of pieces that I thought would work really well with an orchestra. And, I actually got some quite good reviews from the classical people, even, most of them sort of, don't want to know about rock guys doing classical music is somehow beyond the pale, but it was, got some good reviews, actually sold quite well, far better than anything I'd done before. We dreamt of having our own studio for years, because going to these holes in the ground in first of all in London and stuff, we just thought it'd be so nice. Then you could actually sort of write and record in the same place. We know time pressures. Visible Touch was the first album we did here.
And one we got this, and it was fantastic.
Yeah,
And the key way was to be able to sort of feel, because, otherwise you have to write an album, rehearse it quite well, and then go and record it. So you'd already sort of decided how it was going to sound, whereas, because we owned the place, we could sort of write and almost record at the same time and mess around. It made the whole thing a lot freer and I think better for us.
When we played live, the songs that have really stood out on things like Domino and Home by the Sea, which were probably the classic songs from the later periods. It was extraordinary, really. And you knew it couldn't last, actually.
It was quite fun,
Well, we made that, we had the girls in the middle, didn't we?
Yeah.
We insisted, we'd made so many videos, and we just wanted to make it one time to do a video like with David Lee Roth.
To be near naked women.
Yeah. So we had this bit in the middle of that, which was an excuse for it, really. When we put out We Can't Dance, we were very confident at that point. The line, something about the way we walk, that I thought was the sort of funniest line in it. So the feeling I had was that we should do the choruses with a silly walk. Now, the silly walk was his. He'd had this walk around, which apparently used to at stage school or something. People
Yeah, when I was at drama school
Wasn't that good?
you could always tell the people that really shouldn't be doing dancing, because they did the same foot, the same hand. And it just always struck me as funny that.
And obviously that did well, the album did really well. But it was sort of towards the end of that period when we released our final single from that album, a song called Tell Me Why, that I sort of felt suddenly it was, something had changed. And they didn't get played on radio and stuff. And really from then on, suddenly Genesis was sort of like that. These things sort of suddenly happen, you don't quite know why. We just carried on doing what we'd always done. We just used to write. We probably got better at doing the shorter stuff, there's no doubt about that. We always liked to throw in a bit more sort of thinking kind of music in there. Did long songs and tried to do a few things that were slightly more, slightly less predictable, if you like. But I mean, it's a very difficult thing to know. You just do what you want at the time with the particular combination of people you've got.
We're throwing it all away.
Never underestimate what difference you could make or what you could do. I've seen other people, you know, at every stage with everything I've done who are smarter and better than I am, and that hasn't deterred me. So that's what I say to young people everywhere. You know, don't limit yourself or limit your expectations, because if you want to make a difference, if you want to change the world, it's all there.
The secret. Well, the music. Are we being serious for a bit?
For a bit, yeah.
For a bit, okay. Well, he was the reason we were there, I think. I don't think we would have ever formed a group without Ant. Well, I wouldn't have done. Certainly Pete wouldn't have done. Mike might have wanted to, but he needed Ant because, you know, Ant was also probably the best musician at the time. He's the only one who could actually do something with his instrument. You know, I was plonking on I was a pianist, but that was about it, really. I don't know, really. And we also used to sort of get a little kind of, he's 17 or 18 at this point. I know, but by the time he left, we were 20, I think. You sort of believe there's a kind of magic with the four of you sort of thing that you wouldn't get with anyone else sort of thing. So it was a very significant thing for us, really. And, you know, obviously he was a close friend of all of us, you know. So it was just one of those things. And he was the one he found it most difficult on stage, and we all thought he was the one who loved it. He loved going up there. He used to wear funny hats and go out there and ponce about, you know, much more than the rest of us when I've never been like that, as everybody knows. And even Peter was not a show-off at all. You know, he was the show-off. So it kind of was a very, you know, it was unexpected in a way, leaving. I mean, I didn't know the problems he was going through. And even Mike didn't, and he was much closer to him than I was.
So it sounds like the sense that he was the sort of unofficial leader in a way.
In some ways he probably was, yeah. I think he was, you know, I mean, the writing probably was distributed amongst all of us, but I think Ant was, when we did the Trespass album, I think he was kind of the most, you know, most important in many ways. I think leader's the wrong word. I think he just was very significant at that point in time. And, you know, it seemed that way anyhow. Whether it actually was the case, it's you know, later events might suggest perhaps it wasn't. Perhaps we overestimated that aspect of it, but it seemed at the time very important. The whole way you play the game is to make the singer he's your figurehead, you know. So you give them all the ammunition for a solo career, and if they, you know, and if they're good as well, which both of those are, then they will make the most of it. You know, when Peter left the group, I think initially we were worried about our own status a bit. So if Peter was really successful and we weren't, it would kind of always all Peter all along type stuff, you know. So that would have upset us, I think. But as it turned out, Trick of the Tail probably did, you know, certainly as well as, probably better than Pete's first album. And we were able to sort of like establish ourselves independent. I don't think it was ever, you know, with Phil it was slightly different because Phil was still in the band. So it made a slight lopsided kind of viewpoint of the band, I suppose. You know, people always sort of say, and even you've said it, I think, a little bit, that sort of the hits sort of come from Phil. But that was not in the case in the group. If Phil had never done a solo album, people wouldn't necessarily think that. It's just how it turned out, really. And so that side of it. But it would have been quite difficult, I think, with Phil's success if we'd been younger. But, you know, by the time Phil was successful, we were in our 30s and sort of big enough to take it, I suppose. It was just one of those things I mean, it was great for him, you know, he's our friend. We wanted him to do well, but, you know, didn't want him to do that well, not initially. But, you know, it was the thing, and it kind of never went away. You perhaps just knew that he couldn't sustain it. So if he was there all the time, it was going to affect the group at some point. And I think it never did really while he was with us. It was only after he left, in fact, that it probably affected him as much as anybody else. So it's, but he was ubiquitous for about 15 years. You know, you couldn't get away from him. It was a nightmare.
What about Peter?
The music was, you know, reasonably complex, and the stuff we were using was probably complex for the time. And using 12-string guitars, of course, you got out of tune all the time and everything. I mean, there's a lot of downtime, and he just had to, rather than sitting there and looking sort of silly, he filled it with stuff. And in the end, of course, the stories became longer than the time it took to tune up. So it was going like, yeah, come on, when's this going to end? But he got this kind of, what it gave to the audience is this sort of slightly kind of surreal personality he used to come across, and he'd tell these stories, and it was kind of quite effective, helped to add to the sort of mystique of the band. You know, I think it's hard to look back in those early days of what it was like when you went to Genesis concert, if you go back to when the Foxtrot tour and stuff, where we kind of came onto the mellotron, solo mellotron, playing for about the first 2 minutes, but it was in stereo. This was unusual, almost unheard of, I think. We had the PA system, which was designed purely for the voice in those days. You didn't put anything else through it. But we put the mellotron through it and just put a very simple tape echo loop so that it was in stereo, and it just sounded massive by comparison with anything else. You then had dry ice coming over the stage. I know, biggest cliche in the world, but at the time it wasn't. You've got to understand that. Backcloth of curtains lit by UV light, which responded to the UV, and Pete would come on, bat's wings, with UV responsive makeup. I mean, didn't matter what you did for that first 5 minutes, you were something completely different to anything else anyone had ever seen. It was an amazing thing, you know, it was great. And obviously we developed that idea, but it was something, you know, something unique, and that was, it was very exciting, and you were aware of that too. I mean, you'd come on and we did those tours, you know, and I'd start with the mellotron, so it was just me at the front, like this, doing this, and I was, you know, it wasn't lit or anything, it was just sort of UV and lights and stuff. But the power of the chords, it was, you know, it was a good introduction, it was a good sort of chord sequence, it was very exciting, I think, and very dramatic. Melodramatic maybe, but nevertheless dramatic.
This is, in a sense, a whole new direction that you've carved out in the classical area. But unexpected.
Well, it was unexpected that it would work in any sense. You know, I was quite surprised. You know, I mean, it's a bit, you know, it's such a cliche, isn't it? The rock guys, I mean, the drummers do jazz, classical guys do, the keyboard players do classical, you know. And you're sort of aware of that cliche, but you think, well, what the hell, you know, sometimes it works better than others, but, you know, there's sort of 3 or 4 moments on those 2 ones I've done at the moment, which I think really work well. And, you know, it gives me courage to do more. And as I said, you know, I don't know when this is coming out. I think it's coming out after I've done it. So I'm doing this Cheltenham Music Festival thing. I'm actually asked to do this, which is the first time I've ever been asked to do anything, I think. Most people tell me not to do anything. So it will have happened by now. So either it will have worked or not worked, I don't know. But the piece I've written for it, I think is, you know, I think is good. Working with Paul again to help me with the arrangement. And that will, well, as I say, watch this space.